countries where we experience the most extreme impact of climate change, and while these countries have limited capacities to adapt. This is compelling to adaptation to encourage developed countries and developing countries to tackle climate change in terms of adaptation. And fortunately, during the COP27, there is a pledge that developed countries are going to double. And we have non-UN financial mechanisms. This one, we can have some from UN agencies, from IFAD, from UN RED. We can have in parallel banks like World Bank, African Development Banks. We have carbon finance, like biocarbon fund. We have a series of institutions and a series of programs through which we can get money to fund climate in the world. Thirdly, we have regional and national funds, and we have a series in Africa. We have one in Benin, we have one in Rwanda, in Mali, and in Rwanda we have Rwanda's Green Fund. We have one in South Africa. In Asia, we have it in Bangladesh. In South America, we have it in Brasilia, and so. In Ethiopia also we have a Climate Resilient Green Economy Fund. We have all these funds. This is the picture, but the source of funding is not limited to these institutions and these agencies. We can get some other source of funding, but this highlights briefly where we can get major funds for climate change. But when we come back to Rwanda and we look at the funds that came through FONERWA, we see that we have not yet explored all the funding opportunities that we have. This is the reason why this project is coming timely. First of all, to inform, to help the country to get knowledge about the funding opportunities, the funding landscape, and how to get access to those funding. When you look at this, we have a government of Rwanda that has funded. We have KFW, we have African Development Bank, Nordic Development Fund, the World Bank, SIDA. We have GGI, UNDP, Adaptation Fund, GCF, UKAID. We have some institutions that have been funding Rwanda, but it is not enough regarding to the needs in terms of financial resources to address NDCs. When you look at the NDCs in Rwanda, you will see that from 2020 to 2030, Rwanda will need around 11 billion US dollar to be able to meet the targets. But when you look at the funds that we have in FONERWA now, it is very, very far below what the country needs. This means that an effort is needed to seek for more funding to meet the target that has been fixed by the country. In terms of adaptation, we need 5 billion, 0.3. In terms of mitigation, we will need 5 billion, 0.6. This means when you look at the needs of Rwanda, both in mitigation and adaptation, it is almost equal, 50%, 50%. Yeah, we need to invest in mitigation, but we also need to invest in adaptation at the same level. Coming back to this UN climate finance mechanisms, we have beside carbon market, today we not be able to talk about carbon market. I would like to focus on this UN climate finance mechanisms because we do not have time to explore all these opportunities. I hope that we get enough time to go in in each of the programs and the opportunities that are given to finance climate. There is this GEF, Global Environment Facility. There is a Green Climate Finance. And under GEF, we have a Special Climate Change Fund, and we have a Least Developed Country Fund, where this project is operating in this LDCF. And I know that LDCF has also funded Rwanda. We have some project that we conducted with REMA under this framework, this special fund. And we have also adaptation fund that is managed by the World Bank, the adaptation fund. If you want to look at a little bit deeper into these funds and how to access them, I think it is important to get this knowledge. Starting by this adaptation fund, this is the adaptation fund. Starting by this one that was established in 2001, we will see that this fund focuses mainly on vulnerable communities and the sectors in developing countries that are parties to Kyoto Protocol to adapt to the adverse effects of climate change. How to access these funds? Can CoEB, the Center of Excellence in Biodiversity and Natural Resources Management, access these funds? Yes, the answer is yes, but the funding must go through what we call the national implementing entity. We have national implementing entities, we have regional implementing entities, we have multilateral implementing entities. The national implementing entity in Rwanda is the Ministry of Environment. This means that the Center of Excellence in Biodiversity and Natural Resources Management, if we want to access these funds, we need to work with the Ministry of Environment because this money will come through the national implementing entity. The same will apply for other organizations and institutions across the country. Now, this adaptation fund can also help in South-South cooperation, in technical assistance, and the project formulation assistance. They can help this adaptation fund. I think that we need to think deep and how we can access this adaptation fund. And we can go for more information into the platform of the adaptation funds. There we will get more information, especially from the World Bank. And the source of money for the adaptation funds, the money comes from contributors. When you look at this graph, Germany is the biggest contributor. We have Sweden, Spain, Belgium, many countries contributing to these adaptation funds. The areas of intervention are water management, multi-sector projects, agriculture, food security, forest, disaster risk reduction, coastal zone management, urban development, rural development. Elements to take into account if you want to access these adaptation funds is the level of vulnerability, the level of urgency and the risks arising from a delay. If the money delay to come, what should be the risk? Securing regional benefits wherever possible. If it can be transboundary benefits, maximizing multi-sectoral and cross-sectoral benefits from agriculture to water, forestry, energy, and so on. GEF, the Global Environment Facility, this one was created in 1992 after Rio Summit. It's about addressing environmental problems, and among other environmental problems, climate change is at the top level. It funds member states. Up to now, 184 member states referred to as participants can benefit from GEF funding. GEF can fund government institutions, can fund civil society organizations, private sector, research institutions, and other potential partners. And GEF is managed by through World Bank. It has also other funds like Climate Change Trust Fund, LDCF, Capacity Building Initiative for Transparency, Nagoya Protocol Implementation Fund. To access the funds from GEF, there is these funds must be country-driven. To access a GEF fund, the country needs to request for the money, and any country that has ratified the convention for which the GEF serves as a financial mechanism will be eligible, or whether the country is eligible for World Bank funding or recipient of UNDP technical assistance. The programs in which GEF is interested is biodiversity, climate change mitigation, land degradation, international waters, and the chemicals and waste. The country project should focus on food system, land use and restoration, sustainable cities, sustainable forest management. And the project also must be as participatory as possible. From the design to the implementation, they must involve the public, the communities. The Green Climate Fund, this is the largest. It has been created it has been made operational in 2015, but the idea of its creation starts in 2009 at Copenhagen during the COP15. This fund is the largest fund devoted to climate change. Initially capitalized with 10.3 billion US dollar, this fund wants to achieve what we call paradigm shifts to low carbon and resilient development. Projects and the programs are approved on a competitive basis. It's very competitive, and to access these funds, all the projects must go through what we call accredited entities. The accredited entity in Rwanda is now, I think, the Ministry of Environment. If you want to develop any project, it must go through the Ministry of Environment. And it is also, I think, the Ministry of Environment is also the national designated authority, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, this Green Climate Funds has objective to create support, to support developing countries' effort to address the challenge of climate change. It is the largest fund to fund climate change projects, and it is at the international center of debate. And we hope that it will continue to increase, and it will probably be the biggest fund from which we can benefit funds to address climate change. It supports mitigation and adaptation. About mitigation is about to reduce emission from energy, transport, building, cities, industries, forests, and land use. About adaptation is all about resilience, improving the livelihoods of people and the communities, about health, food and water security, infrastructure and the built environment, ecosystems and ecosystem services. This is a very nice source of funding if you want to address climate change and mitigation and the climate change adaptation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Elias. And you covered a lot of ground and a lot of material. So I can moderate questions here, and Vinant can help me as needed. So people are welcome to unmute and ask a question, and I'll start with questions in the chat. You're welcome to put any questions or comments in the chat. So there's a question from Fidel: why those countries like China, which contribute more to greenhouse gas emissions, do not contribute more financially in adaptation and mitigation of climate change, and what can be done?
Yeah, thank you so much. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, these countries like US, like European Union, they have committed a lot of money, but they do not commit money at the same level. I'm not aware of the contribution from China, but I think it is a very good question we need to think about. Normally, the principle is the polluter pays. Now, if we want countries are emitting greenhouse gases emission, they should pay for mitigation. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to meet the target of 1.5 degrees mitigation by 2050. And the whole earth will be in a mess. We continue to experiencing all these bad events. If you see in terms of money what we need, there is a very huge gap. China, I think these discussions are conducted in CoEB. I take this opportunity to advocate for universities to participate in the CoEB, because they know all these issues, but they do not have any room to give their contribution, especially in the developing countries. I would like to encourage Rwanda to associate universities to participate in these discussions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Before we move on, Vinant was asking if you could, apparently there's a slide with the list of the countries and their emissions that might help looking at that question you're just talking about, but I don't know which slide it is.
Slide about what?
What you were just talking about, each country and their emissions. It's where that question came from.
No, I do not have it here. I removed it. I have it somewhere else. I can.
Okay.
I
That's okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I meant a list of those countries which are putting money in adaptation programs.
These ones.
It seems like your slides are not moving.
They are for me. Sorry, I can see them moving. Anyway, just so we don't take up a lot of time.
Yeah, let us go on. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can go Yves Gakunde. Hi, Yves. He's got a question here. And he was saying, good to see so much work being done. Climate finance increase is needed for sure. However, he's skeptical that even if we secure climate funds, we will not get us there as long as we do not have a mechanism to punish countries that do not honor the Paris Agreement. Many countries are still investing in cheap fossil fuels, and what these countries do will contribute to global warming. Can these adaptation funds be diverted into convincing or working with country polluters to abide by the Paris Agreement? Maybe funds provided as incentives to change behavior. Is there a plan for global taxation on carbon? Money always moves the needle, which could be a good incentive for country polluters to rethink their impact on global warming. It's a really great comment, Eve. Elias, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, Betty. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Eve, for this great comment. I think that if I have time, I can prepare a presentation on climate change politics, because it is a very huge debate. There are politics, it's a very political the climate change. You remember to the time of Trump, how things went. It was not very easy, and it's a very political matter. It's a real thing, but it is addressed politically, and sometimes with adverse. I think that if I have time, I can prepare a presentation on politics and institutionals and institutional and the legislation around climate change. I think that's where we could discuss this kind of question.
Yeah, let's do that. We can work with Vinat to organize another session. Thanks for that question and comment, Yves. And Jean-Pierre is asking, some of the big issues to access funds by local stakeholders are the limited technical capacity to write quality project proposals and awareness on funding conditions. Any initiatives about this issue? That's a good question, because that's exactly what the project is about, right?
The project is all about to build the capacity. It's about to build the capacity. We have time to train people on how to write good proposals.
Right, access climate finance. Yeah.
Yes.
Other questions or comments? You can feel free to put in the chat or raise a hand. Okay, Vinat, go ahead.
I have a question about NDCs. In their nature, are they more adaptive or more about mitigation? Or similarly to that question, is the theory behind NDCs the same about all countries, which means all countries should submit NDCs, which has equal percentage of adaptation measures versus mitigation measures?
Yeah, thank you so much, Vena. Thank you, thank you. I do not think so. I do not think so. NDCs are developed based on specific countries' priorities. Yeah, when you look at the NDCs of Rwanda, they are quite different from NDCs from Brazil, from India. They depend on for instance, when you see that greenhouse gases come from agriculture sector, you will focus mainly on agriculture. When you have an industry, NDC, you will focus on industry sector. And adaptation and the mitigation, this also depends on the countries, on the priorities of every country. It cannot be equal everywhere, similar everywhere. I think that every country can make its proper way of doing things.
Great. Again, we have another hand up. Fidel, go ahead.
So thank you very much. We have seen that forestry is part of mitigation measures. I'm wondering if a person on himself can just write a proposal for establishment of forests so that it can be funded.
Yeah, it depends on the donor. It depends on the donor. When you go, for instance, to GEF, when you go to want to tap into these big funds like adaptation fund, the GCF, you will surely need to work with the Ministry of Environment. Your project must be endorsed by the government to get this funding. But for small grants, for other funding, I think when you write a very good proposal, competitive, you can access funds. All you need to do is to enter into all these donors, look at the requirements of every donor, and where you can fit the most.
Good. Thank you for that question. And Franklin, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. I'm thanking Professor Elias for its good presentation. It's very, very good. But I would like to know if there is any developed country, African country, who may make contribution, because I saw in the chat is only European countries, American countries, but I would like to know if in Africa, especially even Rwanda, DRC, Tanzania, Burundi, and so on, there is anything they can make as a contribution. They only receive money for implementation, but there is any contribution for those countries? I'd like to know any precision from Professor Elias.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this question. In my presentation, if I've seen least developing countries around 46, they contribute to only 1% of greenhouse gases emissions. But despite that fact, they are victims of greenhouse gases emission. Logically, how can you be a victim and pay for being a victim?
Yeah, I understand, Professor. I understand, but maybe it is a great challenge. But I know, yes, we are victims, but in some way we contribute to greenhouse gases, and then maybe when you are asking most of the time you are asking without making something. I think developed countries sometimes can refuse because there is any punishment for those countries. So I think it could be better for African countries to make something. For instance, to make some project from government. Government can give money to contribute to that mitigation. I think it is my idea, Professor.
Yes,
But
yes, Frank. I do
yeah,
not say that they do not contribute. Have you seen how Rwanda is contributing to FONERWA? How much money?
yeah,
It is around 9 million US dollar that have been spent by the government of Rwanda to contribute. Of course, they contribute, but we need
okay,
that based on the principles of polluter pays. The
yeah,
most emitting countries should pay,
yeah,
should contribute to mitigate. But
okay,
African countries, least developing countries, should also contribute not only to mitigate, to adapt, but also financially, as the government Rwanda is doing. We have countries that have already these funds, these national funds, like FONERWA. This is a kind of contribution.
Okay,
thank you, Professor. Thank
good. I
you
hope
so
that
much.
answered your question. Yeah, good. Are there any other, I don't see other, oh, Vanat, is that still your hand up from before?
Yeah, it's a legacy hand.
Okay, how about Jean-Pierre, is that a new hand up? Maybe. Then I saw there's something.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Professor, for the good presentation. My question is, I first want to make a small contribution on a comment raised by my colleague who has just spoken. Is it Franklin? Yes, yes, polluter pays the principle, yes. But we do our contribution. I think all initiatives in this climate resilience, adaptation, mitigation should be done. I think even if they are small, but they should be mentioned. Actually, to show that we are not only receiving, but also we contribute to some extent. So it was a small comment. Then to Professor, yes, your project actually aims at building capacity of different stakeholders actually to be able to access these funds. So what are the conditions for the eligibility actually to be among the stakeholders that you support in your project? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Through this project, we are going to build what we call a community of practice, and all those people we come from universities, from the government, from the civil society, from all involved stakeholders, institutions, and individually, I do not think it can be possible. But when you come from, you are designated or nominated by your institution, I think you are most welcome to join the community of practice. If we get a critical, good number of people to attend these trainings, that should be better.
Okay, thank you. I saw Hillary has a comment in there. Sometimes planting trees does more harm than good. Keeping land in good carbon sink state and receiving funding from offsets in production can be just as valid. Is that considered in Rwanda?
Can you repeat this?
Yeah, I didn't tell, maybe Hillary, can you unmute and ask your question?
Yes, certainly. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is relating back to the person who asked a question about making a case for tree planting. It is a often raised issue that tree planting might be a very good mitigation technique. But what I wanted to say was that sometimes planting trees does more harm than good because of the disturbance to the ground, and the keeping land in a good carbon sink state, i.e. as it is, or in a restored state if it's a good habitat, and then receiving funds to do that and to offset any lost production can be just as valid. And I'm wondering if that is actually considered in Rwanda.
Wow, that's very, very good question. You are actually saying what I was wondering about. Sometimes we invest money that contributes to more degradation than more resilience. And sometimes there are trees we plant instead of contributing to adaptation.
Oh, sorry, Philippe, can you mute, please? It's a little bit disturbing. Philippe, thank you. Can you mute?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. We need really to think about this issue of tree planting. We are not necessarily obliged to plant any tree, just planting a tree and saying it is about climate change mitigation. Some are harmful to the environment. We need to select and to validate which kind of tree species we should consider in these kind of projects. I totally agree with you. We need to advocate for this. And I know there is a trend now through COMBIO. This approach has already started through the Ministry of Environment, IUCN, and ABER. They have started this approach. They are mostly encouraging planting indigenous tree species than exotics, because the exotics, not only they do not contribute to biodiversity conservation, but sometimes they also contribute to land degradation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And not even planting trees at all if the ecology of the place is better left as it is, such as a wet marsh. Better not to plant trees there and disturb it.
Yeah, even grassland and savanna woodland.
Please. Yes, please. Yeah, agree, totally agree.
Good point. Philippe, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Professor. And many thanks to Professor Elias for the presentation. What I want to say, I have a project in pipeline related to action towards habitat restoration for critically endangered fish species in African Great Lakes in the climate change challenge. So I would like we work together, probably with some other volunteers, then you orient us following those criteria and where we can submit. If we can submit together to Ministry of our Ministry of Environment, it will be great, or to any place you suggest. Thank you. That is my need. If you can assist.
Okay, promise.
Thank you very much.
Great. Are there any other questions or comments? Well, maybe I do have one quick one, Elias. Do you think that climate finance can push innovation, and if so, how?
Yeah,
I mean, innovation in the climate, like, reducing emissions or adaptation innovation.
Yes. When you go, for instance, in this funding scheme of GCF, for instance, it is mostly about, you will see, innovation component is highly recognized as a useful tool. There are also in adaptation fund, they also focus on technology, but mostly GCF, green global climate fund, GCF, they mostly focus on technology and innovation. I think this is a critical thing they look at.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah. All right, I don't see other hands up, and I think we got to all the questions and comments in the chat space. So, and we're a little bit over time. So I want to thank everybody so much for attending. Thank you, Elias, very much for talking about this project. It's really, really exciting. And I want to encourage everybody to do what you can for climate change, reducing emissions, and adaptation strategies. And also let us know if you would like to give a talk in this seminar series. You can contact Vena, and we would be happy to hear from you. All right, thank you, everybody, and have a great day. Bye for now.